I chose to focus on the 1960s, 1980s, and 2000s for this podcast on the relationship between technology and history. I chose the 1960s because it's the decade known for dramatic technological advancements such as the space race, the beginnings of computers, and the early development of the Internet. It is also known as the decade with great historical impact from the Bay of Pigs, the assassination of JFK, to Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. It is also the decade that my mother grew up in. I chose the 1980s because it's the decade that I grew up in. Historically, this decade is when AIDS became identified, DNA was used in the first court case to convict a criminal, and the Berlin Wall came down. Technologically speaking, the 1980s was the decade where the personal computer became widely available to the general public, as well as public access to the Internet. The third decade that this podcast will focus on is the 2000s. This decade was filled with global fear of terror and attacks due to the September 11th attack, the London bus bombing, and countless other terrorist attacks. Technologically speaking, the 2000s were filled with technology that brought people together, such as Facebook, cellular phones, and Google.
I am happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
The 1960s are filled with historical events and technological innovations influencing each other. In 1962, President Kennedy challenged the country to the space race in his speech at Rice University. In his speech, I feel that he is challenging Americans to think creatively and step up to the challenge of landing on the moon.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills, because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win, and the others too.
In the 1960s, the third generation of computers were born thanks to Jack Kilby, Texas Instruments Semiconductor Lab. In 1961, Kilby created the first computer with an integrated microchip. This tiny creation led to the advancement of computers as well as the creation of the handheld calculator, a giant leap forward from the slide rule. Kilby's microchip, along with the previous generation of computers, allowed for the race to space. In 1961, the Russian space program put the first man, Yuri Gagarin, on a 108-minute orbit around the Earth. In 1969, Apollo 11 landed on the moon, and Neil Armstrong made his famous first moonwalk while families all around the country and world watched from the comforts of their living rooms. The technological innovations of the 1960s were critical to NASA's success of putting the first man on the moon. The innovations from the space race still fill society today. Due to our advancements on the final frontier, many new technologies fill our daily lives. Thanks to the space program influencing further creation of specialized technology, we now have the satellite dish, digital imaging, firefighting equipment, ski boots, digital ear thermometer, smoke detectors, joysticks, and countless others thanks to the space program. The 1960s were also the decade when the Internet was born. Although the Internet of the 1960s is not the Internet that we think of today, the concept is still the same. This infant Internet was used primarily to link computers together at various universities to share packets.
Hello, my name is Andrea Irish Perry, and I am Sarah Irish's mother. Today, I'm going to spend some time with you explaining how technology and history influenced my life. The first time I heard about a computer was, I have an Uncle Archie, and he worked for IBM. He started working for IBM right after the war, and he traveled all over the world. And we really didn't understand what he did, but I asked him one time, what is a computer? And he told me that a computer would fit in a large room, probably as big as my whole downstairs of my house. And it was a machine. And the next time he came to visit, he brought a card that stored information. And that was the beginning of my introduction to technology.
The 1980s were the decade where technology reached homes and started becoming part of everyday life. In 1981, the Osborne 1 was on the market. It was the first portable computer, although it had its limitations. Since it was not IBM compatible and did not run MS-DOS, it failed to become popular. A few years later, more portable computers were being released by IBM and Compaq that were both IBM compatible and ran MS-DOS. This concept of portable computers started the idea that computers could have possibilities beyond work. Not only were computers becoming more portable in the 1980s, but they were also reaching homes. In 1982, the Commodore 64 was released, and in 1984, the Apple Macintosh reached the market. Both allowed people in the comforts of their homes to create documents, edit video, and play video games. This is the decade where computers reached the hands of the general public. I was born in the 1980s, and my father was very interested in computers. I do not remember my home ever not having a computer. My father wrote a simple program in MS-DOS that would allow me to access the programs on the computer simply for me. All I had to do was type Sarah 3 to access a list of programs. One day I was showing my grandmother the computer, and she asked why I typed Sarah 3. My answer was simple. My name is Sarah, and I'm 3 years old. Now that computers were getting into the homes of so many people, the functions of computers shifted from accomplishing work-related tasks and accomplishing personal tasks. In 1984, 72-year-old Jane Snowball made the first online purchase of her weekly groceries. This first online purchase opened the doors to the current boom of online shopping. The advancement in technology allowed for movies to have more advanced special effects. In the movie E.T., a computerized robotic alien was created to star in this movie. Between E.T. and Star Wars, digital and electronic digital effects were taking over the big screen. In 1981, the disease AIDS was discovered. Although it was not a new disease, symptoms were finally linked and named. Since the discovery of this immune system-related disease, there has been great medical advancements in understanding the immune system as well as how to treat HIV and AIDS. Although Watson and Crick discovered DNA in 1953, it wasn't used in the court system until 1987. In 1987, DNA blood samples collected on a rape victim that were then used to positively identify and convict Tommy Lee Andrews. This technological advancement of DNA use for the court system has revolutionized the court's ability to prove guilt or innocence. In 1982, Demings released the book Out of Crisis that focused on the concept of total quality management. Total quality management focused on the idea of eliminating errors in the production of a product. Through the development of total quality management production style, the modern factory has been technologically streamlined to be more efficient.
Now, even as we speak, there are those who are preparing to divide us. The spin masters, the negative ad peddlers, who embrace the politics of anything goes. Well, I say to them tonight, there is not a liberal America and a conservative America. There is the United States of America. There is not a black America and a white America and Latino America and Asian America. There's the United States of America.
In the first decade of the 21st century, technology took on an entirely new face. Computers and internet devices became commonplace in this decade, which allowed for more work to be done in more places and for people to remain constantly connected throughout their day. Between email, social networking sites, internet chatting, and blogs, people can constantly be connected to people around the globe. It is during the 2000s that music shifted from being listened to on a CD or audio cassette to being listened to and carried around digitally on MP3 devices, such as the iPod. In 2001, Apple released the first iPod, which is said to have changed the way that people interact with media and entertainment forever. Apple also changed the way we think about the personal computer with the release of the iPad in 2010. The iPad is an ultra-lightweight, portable personal computing device. You no longer need a traditional laptop to accomplish computing tasks. Another major technological advancement during this decade is the release of YouTube. YouTube allows people to share video on almost any topic they want with the entire world. Through YouTube, you can learn how to change the oil in your car, watch clips from your favorite TV show, or be entertained with home videos for hours. The way that people gain information has changed dramatically in the 21st century. Previous to the advancement of the Internet, people learned about new ideas and news through television, magazines, or newspapers. In the 21st century, people use the Internet on a daily basis to keep up to date with news that they are interested in. In 2005, Stephen Downes began blogging about his theory of connectivism. The theory suggests that in order to learn, you need to be able to make connections with the right material. Interestingly, this theory did not first appear as a journal article, but rather on the Internet on a blog. Through such technology as texting, blogs, and online phone banks, Barack Obama was able to win the 2008 United States presidential election. This was the first presidential election where, through the widespread use of technology, a candidate was able to successfully win an election. Now, as president, Obama regularly uses YouTube to share his ideas and messages. This is similar to FDR's use of the radio and his fireside chat. Technology critically affected the history of each of the 3 decades highlighted in this podcast. In the 1960s, the early advancements of computers were able to allow man to conquer the final frontier. Through the advancement of the space program, countless items invented for space travel are now used in everyday life. The 1980s were when computers came into people's homes and the idea of using the Internet for personal use became a possibility. The discovery of AIDS advanced the medical field in their understanding and treatment of the immune system, and the discovery that DNA could be used in our court system advanced our ability to prove guilt or innocence. In the 2000s, technology became an integral part of daily life. Through the constant connection available with the Internet and cellular phones, Barack Obama was able to capitalize on this and win the 2008 presidential election. He then went on to use the personal video website YouTube to keep people aware of news. Not only have technology and history influenced one another, they have also changed the way that people learn about news. As my mother talked about in the 1960s, people got all of their news either through television or through the newspaper. When I grew up in the 1980s, this had still not changed. The main source of news was the nightly news and newspapers. In the 1980s, people had more newspapers and channels to choose from than they did in the 1960s, but those were still the 2 main outlets. In the 2000s, most people can get their daily news on television or through newspapers, but the newspapers are now available on the Internet. I personally live without television or a physical daily newspaper, but I get all of my news through my computer. From computers to the Internet, society has created new technologies which at first seem like gadgets that then become a key part of our everyday life.